Welcome to The Fourth Bottom Line, the podcast where we meet people from business, charities and politics who are a force for good. In each episode, I'll be asking my guests about the pain and failures that have resulted in the internal changes that have made them the unique individuals they are. So if you desire change in yourself and the world around you, keep listening. Hello, my name is Paul Hargreaves. I'm the CEO of Cotswold Fair and Flourish, two businesses that put people and planet before profit. We were one of the first B Corps in the UK in 2015, and I've written two books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. I realised a few years ago that if we really were going to change the world for better, we would also need to change ourselves. The outer impact of people, planet and profit had to be mirrored by an inner change, and that's what I call my fourth bottom line.
Most people that you will be surrounded by will tell you not to do what you want to do. Life is full of fearmongers, solicitors, accountants, whose profession it is to make you scared, to make you feel vulnerable. And that if you listen to those people, you will never ever chase your dreams. The only thing that's going to make it happen is your passion. That's what you have to believe.
My guest today is Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, aka The Black Farmer. Wilfred had a dream of owning a farm one day when he was on his dad's allotment, escaping from a crowded house in inner city Birmingham. That dream was realised in the year 2000 when he bought a small farm in Devon. This followed working as a chef in kitchens, becoming a producer, director of TV programmes, and launching the careers of people like Gordon Ramsay and James Martin. After leaving the BBC, he set up his own food and drink marketing agency before launching his brand The Black Farmer in 2005. His products are now found in most UK supermarkets, and more recently he's set up his own retail business, an urban farm shop in Brixton. Wilfred describes himself as a poor boy done good, and I would agree, so would many others. It is clear through reading his book Jeopardy that no blockage or challenge is too big to overcome, and there's even a chapter in the book on seeking out adversity. Wilfred had his own measure of adversity when contracting leukaemia in 2014. After that illness, which lasted a year, Wilfred said, "Staring death in the face has the magical effect of clearing all life's clutter away." That's something we'll come back to later. Wilfred, welcome to The Fourth Bottom Line.
Thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure having you. I want to get into a bit more about your childhood, which you talk about in the book, and that kind of revelation of one day wanting to own a farm. But let's go back a bit before that, because I think you were born in Jamaica, weren't you?
So I was born in a place called Frankfield, Clarendon, Jamaica. And if you went there today, it's right in the heart of the island. It's sort of quite rural. I call it sort of farming country. And I can't remember anything at all about the time that I was in Jamaica, because I was there until I was 4 years old. And at the time, what happened was that a lot of people came to this country from Jamaica. They left their children behind to be brought up by relatives and then joined their parents later on in life. And one of the things I noticed you said about me in the intro was to look at one's childhood. And I think it's really, really important if you want to have a real understanding of who you are and the things that drive you in life, is to really try and understand your childhood. Because as adults, we're all surviving our childhoods.
Yes.
And I think that the tools, positive or negative, that we get from those childhoods is the things that determine our future.
And you haven't got a bloody clue what's happening at the time, have you?
You haven't got a clue.
I, like you, probably have done quite a bit of reflecting since then on working out why and how I'm the person that I am. So that's kind of what I want to get into. So you came over but your mum and dad?
No. So what happened is my father came over first, then my mother came to join him, and then my sister and I joined several years later. So so as soon as I was born, I think I must have been about sort of 6 months old, my mum then came to this country. So by the time I arrived in this country, what I came to meet was strangers. I had no idea who they were, because obviously I was brought up by my aunts and uncles. So that experience itself, a 4-year-old coming to a country where it's seeing snow for the first time, it's cold, and then really coming into a household of strangers, that in itself, now that I've had children myself, it's only then you realize how traumatic an experience that would have been.
And where are you in the family in terms of brothers and sisters?
So my sister it's my sister and I were the ones that were born in Jamaica, and everyone else was born in this country. So I'm the oldest boy. Being
the oldest carries some responsibility. I'm the oldest of only 3, but I did feel in my childhood like I had to do a lot of the kind of breaking through. Were you like that as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that I was sort of brought up in a household that was constant change, really, and there was absolutely no security at all, because you have to remember at the time that my parents came to this country with lots of hope that this was going to be a great place for opportunity, and then having to discover that actually they were really at the bottom of the pile and treated pretty horrendously.
Yeah. And were you aware of that at the time, or is that something you've kind of reflected on since?
What I was aware of at the time as a kid was that actually, I wouldn't say that my childhood was happy. It was miserable. And I just thought I can't really sort of look back and sort of think this were happy times. It just felt a struggle. It was just misery. So I was aware that there was a constant struggle.
And your parents, were they happy or not?
No, they weren't happy at all. I mean, I think the biggest regret I think my father had was coming to this country, because back in Jamaica, he was highly respected because he was a pastor, and, being a pastor, vicar, you're like the thing. And then you come to this country, and then and he worked in a factory, and you're sort of despised, and that he just hated the whole sort of experience, and that he really struggled in adapting.
Was he tempted to go back home, do you think?
Well, the reality is that as bad as it was here, it was even worse there. Because, my mom would tell me stories like before she went to school in the mornings that she would have to go and, carry water, having no electricity, having no running water. So a lot of the things that we took for granted here, it was living in real poverty. So, it's like any immigrant who comes to this country, they go through the shit because the shit is worse back home, is the truth be known.
So you mentioned your dad was a pastor. Was there any sense in which they were, telling you what to believe in terms of your faith when you were kids?
Well, I think the thing about being poor and life being a real struggle, you need something to center you. And I think that for a lot of people, religion really plays that role. It actually helps them to forget the trials and tribulations happening outside, and think of something beyond that is better. And that was the glue really that helped them to endure the misery of life. It was because they were sort of the Pentecostal faith, and so part of the struggle and the strife was that something is better on the other side. And so I've always found actually that in a sense a lot of the people from that time who did well actually came from very, very religious backgrounds, because within that there's a discipline. And that discipline helps you sort of get focused rather than actually just become quite wild. So if there's one thing that I am grateful for is that discipline. I hated it at the time in terms of going to bloody church every Sunday and during the week.
Yeah, I was forced to go to church as well, Church of England. And then I worked out, actually, if I joined the choir, I got paid to go to church, which was a better scenario. At least
I didn't know that you're a church man.
Yeah, we got paid for normal Sundays, but the big payday wasn't a lot of money.
We didn't get paid at all, but you had to go in the mornings on a Sunday, in the evenings, and then during the week, and you had no choice about it.
Did you feel a sense of resentment about that, do you think? Later, normally it's when you become a teenager, you kind of resent having been forced to do something when you were younger.
From a very young age, I think you may have read in my book, actually, that at the age of 11, being in my father's allotment was a real oasis from the misery that I was surrounded by. And I can remember making myself a promise that I just want to get away, that the environment that I was brought up in had nothing to offer me. So it was very, very clear from a very, very early age that if you were going to get on in life, you ain't going to get anything from here that is going to enable that to happen. So from a very, very early age, I knew I was on my own, that I was an outsider, and that in reflection, I could look back and see that actually there's a gift in terms of being an outsider, because you could basically make the rules and you're not actually strapped by the rules of the group, the rules of belonging, being clubbable. And so, in a sense, what was a disadvantage, i.e. my color, actually became an advantage, because I sort of realized that because my color was going to prevent me from being part of things, being accepted, that I had absolutely no choice but to make something of this world on my own. Yeah. Totally break all of the rules and conventions, because everything that I did would have been totally outside my parents' and even my community's imaginings, because the perception is that if you were black, there was only certain things that was available to you, and nothing else.
And because that comes across really clearly in the book, the fact you're always outside and challenging. But were your parents thinking you should play it safe, or did they encourage you to spread your wings, which you've clearly done?
No, they played it. They wanted to play it safe. And again, I think one of the things that I've always been fascinated with is that it takes a very entrepreneurial spirit to leave your country of birth to come to another country. So there had to be something entrepreneurial about them. And for any immigrant that you see, even these poor boat people who come across, there is something entrepreneurial in their spirit to try and better their lives and the lives of their children. So I admire people like that. And then having done it, and then part of being an entrepreneur is all about, it's a marathon, the endurance of it. But what happens to some people after they've taken that initial step, they've got through, they're so relieved, they then clamor for conservatism, for supposed stability. And I think that's where my parents was. It's like, actually, this is hard, this is tough, let's just be grateful and sit tight, keep your head down, and don't sort of rock the boat, And I think what has happened again with the third generation, that's what you tend to find, is that they have been influenced by their parents, and they tend to become people who are quite conservative, and they don't have that entrepreneurial spirit, because it was so terrifying, the experience for their parents. They think we don't want to live through this.
And the values that you talk about, the discipline side, what other values would you say that were kind of instilled in you in those early days?
Well, again, the values would have come down to, in terms of when I look about, am I a religious person? I would say I'm a person of faith. I believe that there are things beyond my understanding and comprehension, and I'm at one with that. And so I'm grateful to have had that sort of teaching. And that gives you a sense of values, really, in terms of, your belief system. And your values are really, really important, because especially in business, it determines how you do business and how you treat people. But I would say that the way that I treat people is not probably down to my values. It'd be down to the fact that actually it was fucking hard growing up. It was really, really, really difficult. And and every single thing that I've achieved in life, someone has gone out of their way to give me a break. And it's been so important to me that most of what I do in my life is constantly trying to help people, because I've experienced the power it can have on a person's life if someone actually holds out a hand, gives them a break. And that becomes a real deep-seated sense of value in terms of how I operate as a person.
Luck or hard work, which has the greatest impact?
Well, it's real hard work. Luck, you could be as lucky as hell, but if you don't know how to work hard, you're not going to make it. And you could only work hard if you are programmed to know that life it's a survival. So in my case, again, the thing that I look back on is that the struggles, the hardship that I had, and it became ingrained. I didn't expect it to be any else. If you take my children, for example, who are very, very privileged, they're the opposite extreme. So one of the things I wanted for my children is to have the privilege that I didn't have, and they are seriously privileged. And they went to boarding school, they went to everything that I wish that I had. And therefore, their view of hard work will be very different to mine.
Yeah, but if I take what you say in the book to extremes, that isn't, in some ways, I can see it's doing them a lot of favours, but in other ways, it's not, is it?
Well, I tell you what I believe, and there's one thing that I wish that I had. I don't think it matters what qualifications you have, what's your background. A lot of the things that we tend to use to measure people's value and worth, really, it's irrelevant. The one thing that you need to have is confidence. If you have a confidence in self, what that does, it says, well, I have no control of the future. I have no control what may happen to me, but I have the confidence that I will find a way. I have the confidence there will be a solution. And that is the one thing that I wish that I had, because with all the disadvantages that I had as a child, whether that was my color, being dyslexic, not belonging, I never could go into a situation and be confident. And even when I did, it was a falsehood. It was a pretense.
Well, maybe you've got to start. Maybe you've got to start by pretending before it can. Because clearly now you're really confident. I mean, you might not feel that you are, but you come across as being very confident. So when was that?
Well, I don't know if I'm very confident. I'm a fighter. If I look at my children, if I look at Alexander's very confident, and he's like you. He's a mild, quiet man, but there's an inner confidence. And the thing that I come with, I'm a street fighter. Yeah. And sometimes being a street fighter comes across as confidence, but actually it's survival. And so basically part of how I've managed to achieve all the thing that's driven me is a drive to survive. And when you want to survive, you'll do anything. The whole basic instinct of a human nature comes out, because, when you're in that position of survival, which a lot of people never find it, that's when... Yes,
but you've also had that kind of goal from... How old were you when you were on the allotment and wanted to have a farm?
So I had the goal from about 11.
Yes.
And it was a simple goal. And again, I can remember looking at my family and looking at my community and thinking, actually, there is nothing that you have that I want or is going to help me achieve anything. Yeah. And most people are trapped by their backgrounds. But I knew early on that actually there's nothing that they had to offer me.
It's quite unusual though, isn't it? At that age to see the future. I mean, I didn't have a clue what I was doing till I still haven't.
It would have been different if I liked my parents. I didn't like my family. Right. I didn't like my parents. So there was no there were no anchors.
Yeah. And how much of that was the connection to nature? Was it space or nature or?
Well, I think that again, when I think that, because the relationship with my mother and my father was broken at such an early age, I didn't really have any sort of big connection at all. And so I would think that from a very, very early age, I would have always felt disconnected.
Right.
And so it's only when I've had my own children that you sort of realize that that connection from an early age is so fundamentally important. So there was nothing holding me back. So therefore, I always felt that I was on my own. And therefore, I then had to go and find my way. I didn't really care about family or people because there was never that sort of connection. I always felt I was on my own.
Did you rebuild that connection at all later? Because they must have looked later on and said, wow, Wilfred's done amazingly here working at the BBC.
It's been really interesting, actually, because my father died before I really started to achieve success. But I can remember when I was really ill, and because I hadn't seen my family for a very, very long time. And I think that disconnection with my mother would have given me a bit of a mother complex, basically, always wanting to be sort of rescued. And I can remember when I was really, really ill, and my mother came to see me in hospital, and I was sort of on death's door. And I can remember her holding my hand and rubbing my hand and saying, I'm a 57-year-old man now, yeah. She's rubbing my hand and she's saying to me, my poor, poor baby boy, my poor, poor baby boy. And that was like a sort of connection. So there was still a side inside me, that little boy, that still wanted to connect with his mother that had sort of disappeared. And that's what I find quite sort of intriguing is that, it doesn't matter what we achieve in life. There are certain connections that actually, if they're not fixed, they could have some sort of an impact. So that fixed the connection with my mother.
Okay.
And so therefore, there wasn't that sort of yearning. And then also to understand those sort of dynamics. And then also, in order you've got to go away to achieve in order to come back to be appreciated. Because when people look at my life from my background, they are amazed. They are, they celebrate it. It's as though I fulfill their dreams. So part of what I do in terms of the Black Farmer and the farm shops is that I'm fulfilling a lot of my community's dreams because it's saying, well, we could do this, we could belong. And that's quite important for me, is that actually what I'm doing is for the greater good.
So I want to talk to that year you were in hospital with leukemia. I've got no comprehension of what that's like. I mean, how ill were you during that year? Were you...
Well, I was really, really ill, and it's only having spoken to the surgeons and my consultant afterwards, he's saying how lucky you are to be alive. Because what happened is that I had a condition for years called myelofibrosis, which is like, people sort of live with it. And then the worst possible thing is if that condition mutates to leukemia. And if it mutates to leukemia, it's normally a death sentence because it's very, very aggressive-minded. And therefore, just from the moment that I got it, it was like terrible. I mean, I was in intensive care for 3 days where they had to actually put me under an induced coma for 3 or 4 days. And the whole experience was that the only possible cure for leukemia is to try and find a match. And they thought because I had so many brothers and sisters, that would be an easier match. Not one of them was a match. And then also what they then do is that they have this worldwide register for people. So one of the things I would like to say in this podcast, if you're male and you're under 32, do register for for that because it saves lives. And being Black, again, it's a massive disadvantage because there's not enough Black or mixed race people on that register. So trying to get a match was really difficult. And all it is a bit like giving blood. So, all the odds. So this is going through all the time. So what they do is that they try and keep this leukemia under bay, but, it just keeps coming back. And then luckily the hospital that I was at was quite well renowned, they're flying people in from all over the world to do this specialist treatment. And they did something quite revolutionary at the time called a haplotransplant, which was, it was either that or you're going to die. There was, it's like the story of my life, really. There's no safety net. It's just, either failure or success. and it succeeded. And what it really does, that it sort of makes you think that there are two occasions in my life where I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. And the first was when I was about 18, 19, and I was in a canoe, and the canoe capsized, and I got my foot stuck between a rock, and I couldn't get it out. And all the stuff people talk about, my life flashing in front of me, seeing the white light, everything slow motion, but somehow I managed to get my foot out because I managed to get it out of some pimsles that I was wearing. So that was one.
Right.
And the second time was this sort of leukemia when, I'm only here because of right timing and science and a lot of good fortune. So what it actually does, it really does help you to put life into perspective.
Yeah.
It really does get rid of a lot of fear, because actually I'm on borrowed time, basically. And so it's a bit like when people say they talk to people when they're dying, they find it, talking to those people, more inspiring because they have nothing to lose. And so therefore they have a more sort of direct approach to life.
You said in your book, when you get ill, the fear of the future becomes very real. You face your own mortality and think about what your death would mean for your family and people around you. I'm trying to get into that period. So were you so ill you couldn't really think for some of that time, or were you were spending a lot of time sitting there thinking during that year?
Well, that there's a lot of time thinking, because one of the things that I had to be really careful of is not getting any infections. Even now, I have a compromised immune system, and that I have to be very, very, very careful. So you have a lot of time to think, and you can't go out, or we weren't. It was really interesting actually. Even when I was having treatment, they wouldn't allow me to. You couldn't eat an apple. You couldn't eat anything, because actually the germs on it might would kill you. So it'd be better to eat something that has been cooked to death.
Right, okay.
So there's no chance of any germs. So actually, McDonald's was the right thing to do, because it was so processed that all the normal bacteria and things.
Ultra processed food was the answer.
Was the answer, because what would happen, and in the ward that I was in, people would die from a simple infection that a 3-month-old baby would have, because what they do is that they kill off your immune system in order to actually replace it with a new one, and that means that any little thing could kill you, and you're spending your time trying to build your immunity up again. Right. Otherwise, you're vulnerable. So all this stuff they say, eat healthily. In my case, it was to eat as unhealthy as possible, so you couldn't pick up any germs or anything.
You had the business at this point. So
I had the business
what happened
at the time.
to that? Were you still in contact with what was going on, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, at the time, the business was much smaller. It was quite interesting that after I came out of hospital, it's like a ramp up for everything. And so, I mean, it was a relatively easy business to sort of run back then. Yeah. And so,
So that's what I want to dig into a bit, really, because we've got the pre-leukemia Wilfred, very successful. And then there's this massive hiatus. And it seems to me, just from reading what you've written and listening to you on other podcasts, is you almost kind of 10 times the speed after the illness. So what would you say the main differences were between the pre-leukemia Wilfred and the post-leukemia Wilfred? Well,
that's a really good question, because, before leukemia, I had children and responsibility for the children. And so there would have been a degree of caution in the fact that I had those sort of responsibilities. And then after my stem cell transplant, it was the realization you don't have a lot of time, and that it's about what has always been driving me is to leave some sort of legacy, to have done something, to have made a difference to people's lives. And to that point, I hadn't really.
Oh, you probably had, but
well, I think what I'd done is I had achieved a lot personally,
right, okay,
and so I worked at the BBC. These were all personal achievements.
Yeah, okay.
But this phase of my life is that actually it's impacting a lot more people because they could visibly see that actually by having a black farm shop out there, a premium market is actually making a lot of people feel good. The amount of times I'm stopped in the streets and from people of color saying, thank you, really appreciate that, that I didn't have that before. That was really before my leukemia.
Right,
it's only now, and the things that I'm doing, it's big, it's larger for everybody else to say, actually, yes, I could do that, and that sort of stuff.
I've met quite a few people who've had traumatic experiences like that, and strangely to me in some ways, they wouldn't, if they had their time back again, they would still want that trauma. Would you, if you could dial back the time, would you choose to have leukemia or not?
Well, I would choose to have it, but I wouldn't choose to have the physical things. So, for example, you see that I'm coughing here, it sort of destroyed my lungs a bit.
Yeah.
And that, that you see my skin, for example, this is something called graft versus host disease, which is a consequence of the stem cell transplant. And that the only thing, the thing that worries me is that I won't have enough time to do what I need to do. That is a thing that really worries me, is that actually, would I be physically able to do what I need to do?
What do you need to do still?
Is to make a difference. So if you take my farm shops, for example, that is making a real difference to people's lives, because actually what it's being able to do is for people of color to be in environments where you'd never, ever see them. It's only if you're a person of color, you'd probably understand what I'm talking about, because there is you don't see many black people in traditional farm shops. You don't see many black people in rural environments. There is still, in our industry, the food and drink industry, it's one of the least diverse industries in the country. So in terms of trying to give people opportunities and see it's possible, somebody needs to be the pathfinder to go and show this is done, and then it's easier to sort of follow. And I would like to use the celebrity chef as an example. It was the cult of the celebrity chefs that made a lot of young people think, actually, chefing is an honorable profession to go into. I could do that. So it goes to show the power of these pathfinders that open it up for others.
Yes, no, that's true. I mean, chefing, to some degree, still is something you do when you don't know what you want to do.
Exactly.
What about the internal changes in you after that illness? Would you how different would you say you are as a person?
I become more confident with myself, because it's really tough being an outsider, and I think that I've sort of learned that. I've got to a stage where I don't actually have to keep fighting. The business has been around 20 years. Mind you, it still always feels like a bloody fight from day to day. But, you have the idea that, well, you've been around for this long, you should be able to sort of continue. But it's that you and I have spoken about this tons of times. It's still a struggle. So how has it changed me as a sort of person, really? I mean, the only thing is, it's made me, it's made me in more of a hurry, to do something, because sometimes I sit down and I say, well, if I'm at death's door, what do I want to sort of look back and see what I've achieved? So I look back at my children and I think that's a really good tick there. And I've done I've done my bit there. I've broken the sort of the narrative that, so a lot of children brought up in poverty or brought up in really terrible situations, they just repeat the cycle. So I've broken that. And then what I want to be able to do then is to have, and this guy, he did this that actually made a difference, made an impact. So for example, I like to call ourselves the Black Selfridges, or something that actually puts people of color in a different light, to see them able to achieve things that wouldn't normally be achievable.
So I think there's something here about more doing things for others after, do you think? There seems to be more compassion, more desire to get other people there. I think the first half of your life is probably more about getting you there.
Yeah.
And the second half seems to be, just from what you're saying, of more getting other people there.
I don't want to paint myself as purer than pure. I mean, the thing that totally sticks in my mind is that, again, I know that actually it was other people who took a chance on me.
Yeah.
That was the basis of my success.
There was a guy at the BBC,
yes,
wasn't
the two guys,
yeah.
Peter Bazalgette and another guy, Jock Gallagher, where these guys took this random black guy that any sensible person would have just said no to. And that, for me, it sticks in my mind. And so I get a lot of pleasure out of people coming to work for me and actually helping to develop their potential. And so I'm helping developing that potential, sometimes making them go through pain, because, it's teaching people that you're never going to achieve anything unless you go through sort of pain, but they know that I've got their back, because sometimes that's all you need in life is some support structure in order to go through. And that's what I provide, which is I believe in you, I support with you, but you've got to go through your personal pain. So I like doing that.
Yeah, because that's another area I want to get, because it is probably one of the most bizarre chapter titles in any book I've read, the one about welcoming adversity. Most people run a mile from adversity. So talk to us a bit about that. And say, a young person, maybe 30 today, how do they go about welcoming adversity?
Well, the thing is, the thing that stops most people from achieving anything they want is fear. And fear is not real. It's a construct. It's stories that we tell ourselves. And that actually what it does, it means that it pulls people back. And what you need to do is that you need to train yourself to be happy with fear. And so within our business, for example, it's a big deal about actually, do not celebrate the fact that you've never made a mistake. If you're celebrating the fact you've never got anything wrong and you've never made a mistake, you're not living life. You're slumming it.
So would you go as far to let people make mistakes?
People make mistakes all the time.
But do you let them? I mean, if you see someone making a really big mistake, do you step in or do you let them?
It depends. So what
depends
would happen?
how big it is.
So I will step in. But what I think it is about mistakes as well, it's trying to get people to understand the psychology of making mistakes. Most people think that when they make a mistake, there's something wrong with them personally. It's a personal failing. That's why people don't like admitting it, because they think personally, therefore, must be wrong, must be bad. Rather than it's nothing to do with you personally. That failed. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, you're a rubbish person. But most of the people that I find, that is the issue, is that they think getting it wrong is saying something about them, whereas it's not. And so I like to use myself as a big example. I mean, I'm dyslexic. I left school without any qualification. I know nothing. The only advantage that I have is that I'm fearless. I don't let fear hold me prisoner. But I'm going through life not having a clue about how to do anything. But I don't.
Similar to me, yeah. So can someone achieve their purpose in life without adversity, would you say?
Well, most people, need to find out what their purpose is. A life without purpose is a life of survival. And that most people's lives are survival. So what happens? We have a culture of well-being. Everybody talks about well-being. And I work on the basis is if you need well-being, you should leave the job you're doing. Because actually, when you're finding when you're doing the things you love, you don't need any well-being. That's the greatest well-being there is.
I agree with that.
When you're doing a job to survive, you need all this well-being to help you endure it. And so your own personal responsibility to self is to find the things that you love. So the thing I do when I employ people, I think we talked about this the other day, I don't like giving somebody a job. I just don't like it, because the moment they want to negotiate their salary, their terms and condition, I'm not really interested. I want to find out what is your personal purpose, and this job is on your journey of fulfilling that personal purpose.
So this sounds a bit like university for entrepreneurs, what you're doing.
Well, what's really interesting that I find is that the people who are teaching people about entrepreneurship are people who've never done it themselves.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yes. I mean, one thing I don't like employing people who've got MBAs.
Oh, man.
Because they don't know much.
Most of the people, I did some research once, most of the people who ever have done MBAs never go on to run their own business.
No.
And as you and I know, there's no theory about business. Actually, it's all about the head. It is all about the head. And I think that MBAs probably will teach people how to be middle managers, but they won't teach people how to be entrepreneurs. And the only way to do it is to do it.
It's the same with the universities. A lot of people go to university that shouldn't go because it makes them massively risk averse.
Exactly, And I think one of the great advantages for me as well is that I never went to university, because what university does, it teaches people the protocol of how you should do things, how you should write an essay, how you should answer a question. And so everybody comes out with that way of doing things. When you're dyslexic and you're like me, you don't operate by anyone else's rules, which is a real advantage. So, well, because you were taught that's the way to do it, well, sorry, in my book, we're going to do it this way.
Yes, although my only thing, I think I'd never used my degree, but I think one thing university did teach me was how to challenge. So I think you
challenge in a particular way. It's about an argument, isn't it?
But having the confidence to challenge, it gave me, but that's not for everyone.
But it's all what university does. It's all about rational logic. Okay, the biggest prisoner is logic and rationale. Everything that I have done has never been rational and it's not been logical.
Let's get into that, because I'm very much try and run my businesses through. Yes, sometimes there is a rational side to it. Generally, though, a lot of our decisions are made by intuition and what feels right. Would you say you do that? And if you do, where does that kind of sense of knowing come from?
Well, it's really interesting because my son has just joined my business, Alexander, and he's a totally different animal for me. He is university, as I said, public school, university, very rational, logical-minded man. And it's like, I call it's like having an adult in the room, And that's actually, what's very useful about him is that all the other people who think and behave like that understand him. People like me used to frighten the hell out of them because there was just no way for... So what I find about people like us, they're either terrified or they're inspired, but they don't feel comfortable. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So in order to do anything different, it is about making people feel uncomfortable. And so it's nice to have someone like Alexander around now, because it will make them feel... They'll feel secure because they speak the same sort of language. But,
Yes, I think a whole business of people like you or me probably wouldn't work terribly well.
Well, it wouldn't work terribly well, but we are the change makers. Yeah. We are the people that make a difference. And everything that then becomes part of the mainstream is because of people like us who've gone out and say, actually, it is possible to fly to the moon. It is possible to do anything. Whereas the mainstream just wouldn't say, well, rationally, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. How could you think like that? And people like us says, I don't care. We're just going to do it.
Yeah. Is there a spiritual side to that, would you say? So it's kind of ideas coming from elsewhere.
I don't know if it'd be spiritual. I mean, again, the worst thing anybody could ever say to me in my company and things that this cannot be done. I hate it. And I think it comes from the fact, again, being black, being an outsider, and somebody says you can't be done. I just hate it because I worked on the principle that anything is possible. Anything is possible if you put your mind to it and you're prepared to pay the price. And so that's how I tend to work, is that if you say it's not possible, you're saying you don't want to do it. But it is possible.
And where do you get your energy from? Because you're full, I think late 60s now?
66. Yeah.
Not mid-60s then, sorry about 66, that.
Coming up near to 70.
You're massively energetic. Quite a few people at your age have kind of finished, as it were. Where does your energy come from? Because it's quite unusual.
For me, going away on holiday for a week or so would be like death. 3 days and that's it. So the idea of doing nothing would be like a sort of death sentence to me. And even during COVID, or when people were sort of boxing, I would find myself having to do something creative. I think I made candles, or I would then make music, or I would then do art. I'd always have to be doing something creative to feel alive. So the idea of retirement, when people say they're going to retire, where actually every day is the same, would be, well, that is death as far as I'm concerned. So, it's to always be creative, to think, to do interesting things.
I don't know how often you get down to the farm in Devon.
Well, I haven't been down to the farm in Devon in months, because obviously with opening the shop here. Yeah. And you see it's quite interesting actually opening the shop, because the simplest thing to have done is to get in a team of operators who know how to do that sort of stuff and to operate it. But there's no fun in that for me. There's no pleasure in that. The pleasure in it for me is learning, and then learning of how to do it in a different way, rather than find formats. Because I remember when I was thinking about this, and then talking to all these people who've done it before, and it says, well, you must do this and you must do that, and must do that. Well, some of that's fine, but the idea that all I'm doing is just putting a format into there, well, I think, as I said to you before, I don't regard myself as a businessman. I regard myself as trying to create something different. Yeah. Where people come in and say, wow, this is different.
So you're there most days, are you?
I'm there a lot of the days, yeah. Because what I'm trying to do is cement in the culture. Because one of the things that I've really found when you're dealing with, it'd be interesting to see what you think about your business. When you're dealing with people, we're a people-based business, it is very, very easy for people who are operating the business to put themselves before the customer. It really could. And so in my business, I'm fanatical about that. These are the people that are paying your wages, and you basically, if they say jump, you jump. And so there's a lot of stuff we have in our business that everybody has to do customer service. If you've got a stutter, I don't care. You do customer service. That's not, you don't work here. Everybody has to go and work in the shop. Because it just trains people. Because, we talk about in the UK, we don't have a really good hospitality culture, because the Europeans were very, very good at it.
We're rubbish here.
The English were the Indians are very, very good at it. The British are rubbish at it. And so, anybody in my company, that's the first thing,
And we talked about this last night, actually, in our retail business, that the reason people come, yes, it's because they got nice products to some degree. That's not the main reason. The main reason people come is because they want to feel loved, they want to feel cared for, they want to receive hospitality. We've forgotten what the word hospitality even means.
And that might mean talking to a lady about her cat for 20 minutes. And that's what I say to people. It makes their day. They become your sales force. So that's what I say, you're nice to a customer, they become your sales force. And that's what's really, 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 really important. And I just think people like you and I have a big job in terms of getting British people to understand that hospitality isn't low. It's an honourable thing to do, because you're making a difference in people's lives.
And people think that serving others is some kind of chore. But actually that's where people get their fulfillment from, isn't it? The happiness.
Exactly.
Because as humans actually aren't meant to be on our own. We're meant to be in community with other people.
But I can remember when I went to see your farm shop, and you see all of those people there, having their lunch, having a real sense of community. It's an important place for them where they can actually come and be human, really. And I think what's been really interesting is that when we look at the death of the high street, you find that lots of people, and this is what's fascinating about technology. Technology has made things easy and convenient, but it's actually taking out some fundamental things that we need as human beings, which is to connect, to be able to commune with each other. And one of the things I would like this Labour government is to see, there's a real big opportunity to try and rejuvenate our town centres, because they are a very vital hub in terms of people actually communing with each other, rather than thinking that getting a parcel from Amazon is going to be able to fulfill all your needs. It will fulfill convenience, but it's not going to actually.
Back to Mary Portas stuff, aren't we? Which I'm going to a meeting with her in a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah. Well, tell her about. Yeah. I'd like to get on board with that sort of stuff, because I just think there's real big opportunities, because it is so criminal and sad to see the destruction of our high streets, which actually, if government were more alert to it, they would have not allowed it to happen. But what happened is that all the big boys basically said, look, we will look after the food and things like that for you, kill off all the independents, and been allowed to kill off the independents, when government should have said, well, no. Yeah. Actually, you can't. I mean, if you take that, about 20 years ago, there used to be a lot of independents around. The big supermarkets went and bought them up, so they could then have all these local shops, and then basically they just fill it with commodities, strip out all the sort of personality, and that's one of the big damages I think we've done to our societies. And we should be encouraging independence, because it makes a massive difference to the community.
You're singing my tune here. Let's think about briefly, before we finish, the future. What do you think you'll be doing in 5 years' time?
5 years' time, I'll be 71. What I'm hoping, and this is what that I have enough time to do it, is that I'll have a number of these black farmer urban farm shops. I'd love to see that there's a number of those. Somebody's bought the business so I could retire. So a lot of people have pensions. I don't have any pension. I've basically got to make this business succeed as my only pension. And then also what I want to do is that I want to convert my farm into a center where actually people could actually come and train and feel as though they belong. It's sort of a safe place. And I then also want to have a big farm shop, probably not too far from you, where people, when they're traveling, don't get too close to you. But when people get married there, they will become, I don't know if you've been to Dalesford, but it would be like, it'd be more of a sort of acceptable Dalesford. Dalesford is quite elitist, and it's a very nice experience.
Most people can't afford to shop there.
Most people can't afford to go there. And I want something that I call as affordable premium. And so people, it's a bit like what Richard Branson has done with the Virgin brand. What the brand stands for means that it could be a farm shop, it could be a hotel, it could be a pub. It could be, because actually what people are buying into is what the brand stands for. That's what that's a legacy that I want to leave, is that actually, and for me, the day I know I would have done it is when I've got a black farmer farm shop at Heathrow Airport or Gatwick Airport, because it's what the brand stands for, not what it sells. And that for me is that's a power of a great brand.
And how does the black farmer carry on when you have sold it?
Well, it's a bit like, what happens with the likes of Cadbury's and all these great brands that we now have been around for 100 years. They all started off with an entrepreneur, whether that's KFC, any of them, they started off with an entrepreneur that had a vision.
But some of them have lost their ethos, haven't they? Lost their values.
I
Would you be worried about that? Or
I can't be responsible for what happens when I'm dead. All I want to do is, because it's my personal journey in terms of what I want to achieve now. What Alexander does with and things like that is down to him. But in terms of backing up my life and saying, well, has this been a life that's been worthwhile? I'd be able to say, boy, you did bloody well.
Well, I was going to ask you, actually, what do you want people to be saying at your funeral? Not that we, want that to be any time soon, but...
Well, I want my funeral to be an inspiring and encouraging, really, because it is a story of actually anything is possible. Anything is possible, and that if my story could help people to say, look, all I've got to do is have the right mindset, and then anything is possible. That is what I would like to be able to demonstrate.
So if there's someone listening to this, maybe they're in the sixth form at school and they want to have that entrepreneurial mindset, have you got any tips for them?
Well, yeah, the biggest tip that I will have is that most people that you will be surrounded by will tell you not to do what you want to do. Life is full of fearmongers. And there's a whole industry of fearmongers, solicitors, accountants, whose profession it is to make you scared, to make you feel vulnerable, to make you feel you're getting your bankers, okay? And that if you listen to those people, you'll never, ever chase your dreams, because actually it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And the only thing that's going to make it happen is your passion and your dream. No one else is going to be convinced of it. You know, it's a bit like when I started the Black Farmer brand. Everybody just said, whoa, you know, that is going a bit too far. That's going to upset a lot of people. But, you know, the only thing that made that succeed, and you have to, it's a marathon. You have to say that in time, people will catch up with you. That's what you have to believe.
Okay, good. So I'll get on to the three questions I'm asking everyone who come on the podcast. First one is, one piece of advice you wish you had when starting out that you didn't.
The one piece of advice, you know, I've told my story, but, you know, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of anxiety. And luckily, that didn't hold me back, and part of it is because I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a safety net. And the worst thing in life is safety nets. And so it's to say, look, it will work out.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. It will work out. But don't give yourself a safety net, because by giving yourself a safety net, it gives you choice. And you could only achieve what you really want in life when you have no choice.
You've probably answered this already, but one piece of well-meaning advice you've ignored, probably quite a few of those.
Yeah. I mean, my whole life is about... The thing that I do is this. Most people will give you advice. Okay, never listen to people who haven't been through the pain. That's the first thing. You know, it's worth listening to those people. And what you'll probably find is those people who've been through the pain is going to be a lot more supportive than negative. So, you know, everybody's prepared, and they'll give you advice from their perspective. So I would listen to the people who've been through what you want to go through and ignore the rest, really.
And I've written a book on leadership, 50 characteristics of leadership. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but one of those 50 characteristics that you need to work on in your life.
I'm really, really impatient.
Okay. There is a chapter on patience.
Patience.
So,
you are very, very patient. Okay.
Yeah, I might come across that way, but I'm actually not.
Yeah, but you come across as very, very, so I don't have patience. And then in terms of leadership, is that I think you need two types of people to run a business very effectively. You need a gentleman and a thug. And people don't like working for thugs. You know, they rebel. And so you have to really understand your personality. So I'm your man that will get you from the East Coast to the West Coast of America. You know, remember those old wagon trains? I'd get you there. You'd go through hell, and you want to kill me by the time you get there. And then that's the time when I've got to get out of there and have a different style of manager to make everybody feel heard and listened to. I'm a dictator. I say to people, you know, it's not a democracy. This is what we're going to do. And then basically, you know, you either come on that journey or not. And I think what happens is that a lot of organizations have become a democracy where it's a sort of a group decision. This is my vision, and my vision to sort of change the world, and that actually people either want to become disciples of that vision or not.
That's a great way to end. So I'll recommend your book, which is called Jeopardy. Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, The Danger of Playing It Safe on the Path to Success. So a lot of what Wilfred said in the podcast is in that book. Thanks so much, Wilfred, for joining us today. Look forward to seeing more urban farm shops springing up over the next few years.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure having this hourly chat. It's been like an oasis from the everyday humbum. So thanks for that.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Fourth Bottom Line. Please hit subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to learn more about my work, follow me on LinkedIn, visit my website, paulhargreaves.co.uk, or look out for my two books, Forces for Good and the fourth bottom line. Thank you for listening.